People who used to be school bullies, why were you so mean and what made you realize you were mean? By Ask Reddit.
I was like 15/16, and it was towards one girl. She began to date a friend's ex. Said friend told me she took her boyfriend and a bunch of drama. I acted like a typical mean girl towards her and it was rough. Turns out my friend was the worst and I had acted awfully to someone who didn't deserve it. I ended up messaging her on MySpace and called her. We worked it out. We're actually really great friends now and can laugh about it 15 years later. We swap books and I see her quite often. We actually talked about this very situation last time. It made me tear up thinking about how mean I was at that time. I'm so glad I sucked it up and admitted I was wrong.
Good for you to figure it out in your own. You should be proud. It's not easy being 15/16.
Yay, 0.9375 is a rough age.
Similar story for me, except we were around 10 years old. A new girl came to my school and a boy developed a crush on her. A friend of mine had a crush on said boy, so spread all kinds of rumors about the new girl. At lunchtime one day, egged on by my friends, I confronted the new girl and pushed her over. The new girl was so calm about the whole thing, and I remember thinking at the time that I could not have acted the same if bullies were in my face and pushing me. Anyway, flash forward 8 years and I bumped into the girl at a CD shop. We had a nice chat and organized to catch up for coffee. I apologized for what I had done when we were kids and she was so understanding. Flash toward another 15 years and she is one of my best friends. She is still so calm and mindful and has taught me a lot about myself and life. I hate the way we met, but I'm so grateful she was so forgiving and I couldn't imagine her not in my life now.
Good for you, but also shows the character of your friend. The fact that she could go through that, talk with you and truly accept your apology is amazing. A lot of people say things are forgiven and then bring it back up later in hurt, anger because they never actually got over it. Props to you both.
I actually think my sister shouldn't have forgiven her bully. My sister's bully was her friend, who would bully her then accept her back to the group, then bully her and so on. All that bullying eventually caused my sister to develop an eating disorder and depression. Then years later her bully came to ask forgiveness, without much explanation except that she felt bad. That almost made my sister break down. She didn't want to forgive her, but I think she said she did. However, she didn't want her to contact her ever again. I don't think that person should have gotten out with just, sorry, oh it's okay, after what she did. She basically ruined my sister's life, so I think she deserves to feel guilty about it. I get that people might have rough stuff in their own life which may cause them to act this way, but it still doesn't make it right. My sister could have died because of their actions and I'm not sure do most bullies truly comprehend that. I was bullied a lot at school. At summer camp, there were 1 or 2 others who had it worse than me, and it felt good to finally not be on the bottom rung. Didn't take me too long to see what I was doing, and I started to feel bad.
Same here. I met with the guy the first picked on in middle school for similar reasons, but he acted completely normal, as if we were always friends. He held no grudge against me despite what I had done. I realized I almost destroyed someone 100 times more kind than I am, and it still haunts me for days whenever I recall him.
Thought I was funny. Liked making people laugh at others' expense. I never thought about their feelings until I was much older. Now I tell my kids every day before school to be kind and everyone's friend, and to stand up for people. I want them to be good humans.
Growing up, people would say that I was funny, so I would continue to tease friends and people to get a laugh. I'm sure some of my teenage insecurity played a big role too, wanting to be accepted, liked, etc. When I got older, I started to reflect on how I treated people and how I didn't stay friends with many people from high school, and realized that what I thought was funny, light-hearted teasing, joking, probably hurt people's feelings, whether they laughed and went along with it or not. Kudos to you for teaching your kids to be kind to everyone.
I was really into Ninja Turtles and Power Rangers and Mortal Kombat. People would make fun of me. I was over of the biggest kids in school, so I would physically retaliate. Years later, when I ended up average size and people grew bigger than me, I turned to bullying people by being the funny kid. But I was just mean. I wasn't funny. I never had close friends because of all this.
For the record, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, and Mortal Kombat are cool AF.
Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, and Mortal Kombat are cool AF. It's weird how 2 of those things are cool and 1 isn't if you were born in a very specific time frame.
I never could get into PR, but I loved TMNT and MK. It wasn't until later in life that I learned what completely turned me off about Power Rangers. It was the disconnect between the style of the show and the style of the action sequences. It was almost like they were filmed by completely different people for completely different reasons with zero attention to detail. It turns out they were using old footage from the Japanese show and adding in filler with the American actors to try and fill the time slot and appeal to American audience.
In my elementary school, everyone claimed to hate Power Rangers because it was for babies. Then you would get invited to a birthday party and it was Power Rangers themed.
This was me too. No abuse at home. No bullying from others. No anger at the world, etc. Just trying to get everyone to laugh. Fortunately, I was only 13 when I had a camp counselor absolutely ream me for making fun of a kid I genuinely liked and considered a friend. The bullying ended there. I'm still thankful for everything that counselor said to me, decades later.
Please tell us what he said. I have a 12-year-old who loves to be funny, and my biggest fear is that, as much as we've stressed kindness, his drive to get a laugh will make him the cool bully. Meaning he'll end up as some ringleader for making fun of others. I know this is some worst car scenario fear of mine, but I'd still love to hear some of the speech your camp counselor gave you. If there are magic words, I want them.
What did the counselor say?
Thank you for being a part of breaking the cycle.
I work in child safety and interview a lot of current and former bullies. You're probably not going to get honest answers out of the worst bullies. The people on the fringes, the ones who were bad but not awful, are going to reply. They can often reflect on it. They were abused at home, bullied by others, or just angry at the world for other reasons. The genuine bullies, the super cruel girls or boys, almost never recognize how bad their bullying was. Either they were so deeply traumatized by other stuff that was going on, more intense violence at home or sexual abuse, that their memories just aren't there, or worse, they don't think they were bullies. They are still bullies.
It's a truly small world sometimes. I moved several hundred miles from the county I went to school for most of my years at several schools after graduating high school and don't regret it. I write stories with people and I'd joined a new site. Everyone was pretty chill, it's 18 plus so there's mostly people my age. And then someone in the Discord chat mentioned the county they went to school in. And we got to talking. And then she shared her name. The girl that led the bullying that was so bad my friend committed suicide was now on the small, niche site that I was on, with a bestiality thing that would later get her booted, thank God, and more issues than I ever had during the time I suffered under her. When I told her I wouldn't be talking to her, and I told her why, she said that she didn't remember any of it. She was such a terrible person all through school that a girl ended her life over it, and she didn't even remember.
I think she faked remembering. Some people have legit trauma reasons for acting like this, but others are really just spoiled little shirts. Woman shrugging.
She was spoiled until high school, and then it kind of fell apart for her. When this happened, she was absolutely spoiled and entitled. I don't know if it was fake or not, but part of me realized that she probably didn't even think it was a problem. After my friend passed, her go-to insult for our group was that we should be like our friend, because our friend did one thing right. Maybe in her head, nothing was because of her because she was above us and our matters didn't and shouldn't touch her life. Does give me a little laugh knowing that she made fun of us for being anime nerds and she turned out to be way too into dogs, though. Small consolations are better than none.
That's just horrific. It's almost impossible to believe people like that exist. But they do. I'm so sorry for your loss and your friend. Maybe somewhere deep down, that will stay with the bully and impact her somehow in the future in a positive way, but she doesn't sound like she had a lot of redeeming qualities.
They exist, and Junior. Hi is effing horrible. My husband took his own life. A girl at school was picking on my daughter, 14, and told her she should go kill herself like her dad did, since it was obvious he didn't want to be with her. No one else should either. My girl will carry that with her forever.
I'm sorry to hear this. My dad also took his life and it really messed me up in my teenage years. Luckily I was never bullied, so I can't imagine how your daughter was sad face.
Wow. I hope that little bitch ends up tossing and turning over those words for decades. I'm sorry about your husband.
Oh God, that is so awful. I'm so sorry.
Oh gosh, when I was 10 my best friend said, "It's no wonder your dad killed himself. If I had a daughter like you I would too." Those people are just the worst people, and I don't think they realize the years of trauma a 10-second sentence can cause. I'm so sorry for your daughter.
After my friend passed, her go-to insult for our group was that we should be like our friend, because our friend did one thing right. I'm kind of surprised that didn't result in a fist fight.
I have an ex-wife that is like this. She has been arrested a few times for beating the poo out of me over the course of 5 years. She'd F me up daily, but I only had her arrested twice. 4 years have passed since our divorce, and the other day she wanted to remind me of all the times I was arrested for beating the poo out of her and abused her and how she will never forgive me. I had to remind her that it was her on video that did that, and that it was her that was in fact arrested several times, and it was her that was the abuser. Blew her circuits. This was an ongoing thing for years while we were together. At some point I started to believe I was schizophrenic. Then I just watched the videos. According to her, the videos are lying. This is endless. There is no evidence enough to convince her. She has even told me it is me beating her in the video. So wait. You're saying I am dressed up as you and you're dressed up as me and I am the one beating the poo out of you in this video? Yes. It's all lies. I don't have any answers. Just saying that I agree anything crazy in the stories above is probably true. It's effing torture that I have to share co-parenting duties with a monster. They never get better.
These are the people that will never get better and will go down kicking and screaming, conniving and manipulating, until the very effing end. Even if they flat out know they are terrible. It scares the poo out of me because I so deeply want to have compassion for everyone, but I was raised by people like this and tortured by people like this, and I know some people truly are unfixable garbage, and I feel so effing conflicted about it.
I completely understand where you're coming from. I had my dad arrested for sexually abusing me every single effing day for 17 years. His response: he only touched me twice. Because apparently that's not enough and wouldn't have already ruined everything. But I remember almost all of it. I don't have many memories being younger because I was traumatized and it left me with black holes in my memory, but therapy has brought a lot to light. Somehow when confronted he had surprised Pikachu face. 5 years after he died and 10 years after he was arrested, I still struggle because in reality he was the one out of my parents who actually would stand up for me, and not all the times he wasn't doing awful things were bad times.
I hope you are doing better. What a horrible thing to have gone through.
I am, thank you. It's taken a lot of time, but I'm making it one day at a time.
I can't remember the exact quote, but a while back I saw a comment that really stuck with me. It was something along the lines of, "My monster sparked my interest in the career I am in today." He helped the community and was very kind to everyone around him. He was very loving and supportive. He also RPD'd me every chance he got since I was 4. Just because someone is good, except that one thing, doesn't make him good. Evil people aren't evil all the time or easy to identify. That's how they hide in plain sight. Abusers don't just groom you. They groom the people around you, so even if you do speak up, no one will believe it because he's such a nice guy.
That is so incredibly true, it's terrifying. My dad was a pillar of the community. Incredibly popular. A deacon in our church. A former police officer. Yet behind closed doors, he was terrible every night. This quote hit really close to home. Thank you, I needed that.
The video does not fit with the story in her head that she is the victim. So, it must be wrong.
I know this. She even said to me 4 days ago that if she was really like that or did any of those things that a judge would never allow her kids back. I said, yeah, I had to give a long-winded explanation to the judge about how you were going to therapy and sticking to your medication and that you have made improvements and should be allowed to see your kids and fulfill your duties as a mother. She said that's impossible because she is in childcare and no judge would agree to take her kids away like that. You were in the courtroom and were almost arrested for screaming at the judge and were told by him to sit down and only speak through your attorney if you ever wanted to see your kids again. Lies. More lies. F me A.
She is in childcare.
I had to give a long-winded explanation to the judge about how you were going to therapy and sticking to your medication and that you have made improvements and should be allowed to see your kids and fulfill your duties as a mother. I do not see why you would want to do this. She is obviously unstable, borderline insane. You should try to protect yourself and your kids from her. I doubt she is going to get any better and may well get worse. Sorry if I am overstepping boundaries here, but from the outside, she appears insane.
She doesn't effing deserve them. I hope you get sole custody, my dude. Ladies like that shouldn't be around children.
My first husband used to hit me every day. Somehow, we still had an amicable divorce. About a year after our divorce, he called me to ask me to be a character witness for him. His new GF was claiming he hit her and was pressing charges. He needed me to testify that he never hit me. The thing is, he didn't think he was asking me to lie. His brain just erased the bad stuff. Before we split, we were fighting all the time, and I kept saying I wanted a divorce. Every time I said it, it was as if he was hearing it for the first time. I think his brain just didn't let him see anything unpleasant about himself.
So what did you do? I'm assuming you didn't lie for him. So did you refuse, tell him the truth, or contract his GF and back up her side?
Jesus mate, I'm glad you got out of that relationship and that you showed your kids it's okay to stand up to abusers.
Talk about gaslighting.
Wow, that's heavy, man. Sorry you had to go through that and still have to deal with her on account of your children.
Jesus Christ. How do you end up with a person like this, even have children? I don't mean it in an offensive way. Just curious what red flags to look for when dating. Good for you leaving. I am not sure I would be able to hold on for that long.
Sounds like a little psychopath.
I'm having a moment. I thought people having sex with animals was fake, a joke, an insult. Genuinely asking, she wanted to have sex with dogs. I can't even understand how that would work. How did I get to my 30s and not know this?
So, bestiality is real, yep. Any animal with a compatible whole or phallic appendage has definitely been fetishized, and with pornographic art being a thing since forever, not even biological compatibility is a limit. I kinda dig werewolves and some mild furry stuff myself, so I end up seeing a lot of animal-human content when browsing for what I'm into. I will say most people who find bestiality a turn on don't actively want to get it on with real animals. It's more the thought and the act of imagining it that's arousing. The appeal is in taking the idea of animal urges and going a step further. I try not to think too much about the fact that there are actual people who actually do want to have real, actual sex with real, actual animals. You gotta be missing a few filters between reality and fantasy to want to pursue that kind of thing for reals.
You never heard of the British Prime Minister plus pig scandal?
Shirts are poos. But I have lots of trauma from stupid poo that I often try to push out and ignore. You're 100% right.
Poop t-shirt poop.
I'm sorry for the specific award. Your comment really hit home a little too close, and I felt like you deserved something. That was the only thing I could give.
Thank you for the award in the first place. It hurts to know that this story is relatable. It's bad enough to know that it happened once, let alone that it could happen again and again to different people. Here's to hoping that the meek really do inherit the earth, and the bullies that never grow up all have acne in the worst places for the rest of their lives.
This sounds about right. I've met people who resembled actual sociopaths who couldn't have friends, and this describes them really well. I never did anything wrong. If what I did in the past was considered mean, my victims shouldn't have been weak. Except I wasn't mean to anyone. Why are you bullying me?
God, that sounds like my mother.
One of my friends growing up had rapid cycling bipolar disorder. With therapy and medication, he's capable of being someone everyone will get along with. If he's not taking care of himself, and especially if he doesn't avoid alcohol like he should, he can be straight up demonic. One time out of nowhere he started ripping into his younger brother in front of guests, telling his 10-year-old brother he needed to shut up and that he was a waste of space, while people were present to witness it. I couldn't sit by idly and I told him, dude, chill out. He responded by snapping at me instantly, what am I doing wrong? This is just the tip of the iceberg. At times it got so bad I was certain we were all going to learn he'd been arrested and that would be the end of it.
My mother has bipolar as well. She wasn't treated until long after I was out of high school. She was abusive in every sense of the word. Think beatings and beratement. Even now when she messes up her meds she tries to get nasty with me. I just hang up the phone when she's that way. I stay pretty far away from her. It isn't easy to just forgive and let it go.
The dude I'm talking about was %100 bipolar, impossible to misdiagnose. When he had his first manic episode he went days without sleeping, eventually became convinced of entire plots with the government tracking his every move. It took more than a year for him to become stable again. For a while he really wanted to be the next president. Failing that, for months and months the only thing he would talk about would be his dreams of becoming a doctor or lawyer, precisely for the money and the chance to prove he was smarter than everyone else. It's amazing when I look back. At times he really is a cool guy, nobody would dislike him. Other times he's so openly toxic and capable of being so horrible I wouldn't want him near anyone I know. Bipolar is always a devastating condition. Rapid cycling, meaning the variety of bipolar where the person tends to have more than one major manic depressive cycle per year, is something I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy.
Yes, it is a devastating condition, but the right meds can work wonders. I've worked in the state psychiatric hospital and have seen miraculous changes in people.
Thanks for saying this.
Interesting. I have a question though. Have you ever seen a case where someone has a perfect life without issues, no trauma, no mental health issues, but is a bully just because they want to be?
I read that people who are wired to be psychopaths can end up just fine as long as they don't encounter any hardcore abuse. But if they do,
there's a lot of people on the psychopath spectrum. Most don't become Ted Bundy.
Check out Dr. James Fallon. He is a neuroscientist who discovered that he is a high-functioning psychopath. It's interesting.
Thank you for this tip. I just found the Smithsonian article on him and it is fascinating. Wowzers.
The comment section at the bottom is wild too.
People that are hardwired to be psychopaths need to have the perfect storm of environment, genetics and lack of nurturing to be triggered. Can't think of a better word right now. If all three of these things aren't in play, then they live perfectly typical lives instead of becoming killers.
Not every psychopath is a killer or malignant.
This is such an ominous comment.
I'm not saying a person like this lives in your building, but
This has the foundations of a really creepy writing prompt, haha.
A girl who gave me a hard time in high school had a pretty decent life. For the area, she had a decent, not big, fancy house and always had trendy clothes, hair and makeup. She was pretty but struggled academically. She was honestly the biggest C word in the school, but everyone thought she was really attractive, so everything she said got giggles. I always thought about how everyone that supports her is shallow, and I wonder how she had gotten to be so rude. Then I found out her mother was a spoiled poo that had her at like 15. Her mother still acted like a teenager and prioritized everything as if she was a teenage girl. That's why she always had the latest clothes and hair. Her mother had the same personality. They would point out people and make fun of them for attention, very immature. Annoying part is their lifestyle was supported by some random guy the mum started dating after the original father left. The guy wanted to be with an attractive woman so bad that he put up with all their poo so they could sit at home and have their lifestyle. There's always some dummy that helps them be the horrible people they are. I wish I could say she's a better person now, but she's not. She's exactly the same but with 3 spawns.
This would be an example of trauma though, right? If a parent is that awful, there's no way their children wouldn't be targets of that awfulness at some point, if not for the entire relationship.
Yeah, the person started out describing a normal girl, but then there's a twist that her mother is actually effed up, but she doesn't recognize it as a twist.
The real answer is that no one has a perfect life. We all experience pain, loss, growth, etc., even as children.
I guess not perfect life, but just like, average good life. You know, they still experience loss, they still get stressed, etc., but it's a life that is comfortable and would be preferred.
Yeah, there are plenty of people like that who are bullies, criminals, etc. It's all in what we do with our insecurities and pain. Or when we're exposed to a certain type of material or event. I would agree with that statement, but I would also add that bullies are usually very shrewd on evaluating who has resources to strike back against them, and who has not. It's all in what we do with our insecurities and pain. That's a great way of putting it.
And honestly, among all those souls struggling to deal with insecurities and pain are absolute predators who find the whole notion of pain and insecurity hilarious.
talk to some single moms out there. Genuine sociopaths and amp psychopaths are out there, masquerading as fun dads and amp baseball dads and amp the life of the party. The level of abuse and amp narcissism and amp just poo that makes me feel violent is mind-boggling. I'm a single dad and work hard to raise good kids. I'm dumbfounded every day by my fellow men and their horrible, pathetic behavior.
Bro, as a single dad that's in the dating scene, you're 100% right. Some of the stories these ladies tell me absolutely blows my mind. I just can't believe how they endured that and how long they endured it for. Some of them are so damaged it's nearly impossible to form lasting bonds with people, even with therapy. A lot of those times I end up walking away just feeling so terrible for them, but also realizing they're in no shape for a healthy relationship. It's just so sad.
I was a bully during my elementary school, and at the time I wasn't aware of the gravity of my actions until I explained my behavior to my friends. When I look back on my bullying behavior, I realized that I enjoyed picking on others because it me gave attention and power that I lacked at home because my foster parents would usually mentally abuse me. Thankfully, I have managed to reform my behavior and I realized that my past actions can't be changed. Also, I still continue to feel regret and guilt, which acts as a constant reminder to be a better person that brings a positive impact instead of creating suffering for my enjoyment.
I hope you are doing well now and that you can bring that message to other people going through what you experienced.
Good on you. I was speaking to my wife about one of my grade school bullies. I had several, and decided to look him up on social media. Back then, he was the spoiled son of a locally famous car dealership owner in the area, but it appears he's grown up into being a free-thinking liberal non-profit activist fighting for good causes. I assumed he would just take over the car dealerships and continue being a twat, but I was wrong. People do change, sometimes. So deeply traumatized by other stuff that was going on that their memories just aren't there. That hit home for me. I didn't know this was common, and kind of always wondered why the hell I had no memories of most of my childhood. Apologies, I meant to give you my free helpful award. Accidentally awarded the comment replying to yours instead.
No worries at all about the award. That's not why I make comments, of course. But the fact that you have few memories of childhood, especially if you experienced a lot of trauma, is extremely common. I found EMDR helped me. My ACE score is very high.
Damn, Googling EMDR and ACE based on your comment have me reevaluating my life.
The books The Body Keeps the Score, and CPTSD, From Surviving to Thriving might be useful for you.
I don't remember hardly anything before my 9th birthday. I'm guessing that forgetting is better than remembering whatever I forgot. Man shrugging.
Not necessarily. Some people just don't really track their childhood memories, hold on to them that much. It's not always repressed memories. Some people just forgot. I have a friend who remembers almost nothing of his childhood. There were a couple of mildly bad things that happened to him, and he actually does remember those. That time his cousins bullied him, the time he got punished for something and felt like he didn't deserve it. But overall, his childhood was just not that interesting, even to him. He remembers things that were out of the ordinary, that broke the farm, school routine, but there just weren't that many of them.
Yeah, your brain kinda just slowly dumps irrelevant stuff from memory. Like who was my 6th grade math teacher? Don't remember since that was 17 years ago and doesn't matter.
I think this is correct. I wasn't ever a monster, although if someone from middle school reached out and described me that way I wouldn't argue with them. I was just terrified that someone would figure out what was happening in my home and tell CPS. I was so scared that they'd take my mother away. Maybe they should have?
I recognized what I did was wrong. I didn't care. I enjoyed it. I guess maybe I'm not as horrible I say I am. I reflect on what I did and cry. I genuinely feel revolted, disgusted by all the horrible poo I've done. It genuinely eats away at me. I still think daily about the poor clerk I nearly murdered over a few $100s. All I can see is how scared he was. He didn't do anything wrong. He never did me any wrong. Maybe I'm not an irredeemable monster cause I feel so much guilt and regret over what I've done.
This may be controversial, but it seems you're self-aware and sorry for your actions. You've grown and learned. Have you considered forgiving yourself? You're not the same person. Are you going to poison your everyday as a result? You're in a prison of your own making, but the rehab worked. You're not going to do it again and you feel badly. That's the point, isn't it? Maybe forgive yourself just a little bit. You're redeemable. You're not a monster. I suspect you've already been redeemed. Forgive yourself. And if you'd like, take it a step further. Donate money or volunteer to put goodness back out there. We sure do need it. Forgive yourself. And be good. One of my many bullies messaged me on FB about 15 years later to apologize and said she did it because her older brothers were mean to her. A lot of bullies are abused at home.
I recently did this to one person we bullied throughout high school. We had the same interests, but I always thought that meant competition. Now we're chatting about guitars and church and current events like we're old friends, after I apologized to him.
I told her I hoped she felt better and left it at that. She routinely physically assaulted me in addition to verbal stuff, and I feel bad that she had a rough childhood, but she made mine rough too, and I didn't see any value in maintaining contact with her. She did say she was prompted to do this by beginning to see the same behaviors in her own kids, which she was taking steps on, and I did thank her for that.
It sounds like she's taking active steps to correct her own mistakes. I hope she sees it through. That said, I'm very sorry for what you went through, and you have no obligation at all to keep talking to this person.
I assisted in bullying so I wouldn't be bullied too. It's one of my biggest regrets in life. Such weakness.
Yeah, at least 3/4 of the bullies in a pack of bullies are just doing it because they're glad they're not the victim and they just haven't realized that no one should have to be the victim.
I think people forget that much of raising a child is basically domesticating a wild animal. Kids aren't born with all the knowledge and social know-how that we adults have. They don't really know what they're doing for a while. No offense to humans, but our kids are bloody feral sometimes, especially if they haven't had many great examples of how to be civilized. It's hard to expect children to all behave perfectly and grasp the consequences of their actions, and even adults aren't impervious to the weird world of group mentality. It's understandable that some kids get swept up in bullying others when there's a dominating figure amongst them, but it's the shame they feel about it as an adult that shows they've actually grown as a person.
More disturbingly, if you look at other animals' play behaviors during that period of life, they're believed to be practicing skills that will benefit them while hunting or doing other survival tasks. Makes me wonder if something about the human-animal required us to get good at excluding and brutalizing others. Of course, humans have a much more varied and robust sense of culture than other animals, so generalizing based off of what kids in the Western world do is probably a fraught way to explore the universals of human nature.
IDK, I think you might be onto something, even if it's quite hard to pin down or prove. Like, with puppies, a big thing with play in general life is pushing boundaries, seeing exactly what they can get away with and where they'll be told to stop. And I think kids do the same thing. So it doesn't seem outside the realm of possibility that they're also channeling some other primitive thought patterns or whatever.
Yeah, an environment where they can push boundaries without dying seems to be pretty common in animals with complex brains and close parent-child ties, but to push back against that point, I was reading an article the other day about some developmental psychology study. They were looking at parenting strategies in families where children were helpful, voluntarily taking on some portion of the parents' work for cleaning, farming, cooking, etc., and ones where they were unhelpful. It identified a few factors that were very subtle. For example, in lots of helpful kid families, the parents will let the children help cook despite having no experience, and they won't correct them until they're done ruining dinner. The soup is very salty, maybe next time we can try to use less. Do you want to taste some salt so you can tell how much to use next time? So even though it means remaking dinner that night, the training costs pay off later. In unhelpful kid families, the parents tend to hover over the child and intervene verbally and physically, taking the salt shaker from their hand and saying, "Okay, that's enough," grabbing their arm if it gets too close to the stove and saying, "That's hot," like a 4-year-old could be expected to know what that means or why it's bad, etc. Factors like that can change whether a kid melts down when you tell them to put on their jacket or whether they volunteer to help carry in the groceries to feel strong, and neither scenario is an example of bad parenting, just sorta different strategies with wildly different outcomes. Neither outcome is the default of humanity, and kids are often steered into them by parents who have no idea what kind of child their actions will produce. The fact that child development is so sensitive to things like that is one of the reasons it's so hard to say, "This is definitely a behavior we do because it helped us survive on the savannah."
Could you link that paper? NGL, it sounds hella interesting.
It's been a few other books since I read this, but IIRC Dr. Gabor Mate focuses on childhood development and trauma, talks about the whole "why do kids in schools become bullies" phenomenon, and it's amazing. His lesson is much more about nurture, that children should be constantly surrounded by a large number of adults who they see interacting and who they then can mimic with each other. Kids going into schools are surrounded mostly by peers for hours and hours a day with hardly any adult-to-adult etc. interactions to learn from. Maybe they're wild animals in the same way that if you got a bunch of baby animals together and had them grow up without adults there to teach them their core survival behaviors. What would those baby animals grow up into? Probably afraid that their needs won't be met because no adults were there to teach them, didn't teach them enough, and now they can only survive through brute force against their own kind. I'm borrowing this from a comic by Foxes in Love on Tumblr, but if all babies are born with their most necessary survival skill ready to go, what is that in humans? Baby snakes bite, baby horses can run, but humans cry because the single most important behavior to our survival is being able to ask for help and to call others to us when we need them. When we isolate children from adulthood, maybe they grow up into something else?
As someone who did step in and stand up for the victims, I can tell you that your approach is not weakness. It's self-preservation. Every time I tried to stop bullying, I would become the target, and even the original victim would jump in and join in on the bullying.
Proud of you for doing what I could not, regardless.
Been there, done that. Keep your friends close but your enemies closer.
TLDR, I was abused at home. I didn't have the skill of being able to take another person's perspective, so I didn't realize that I was hurting others so much. If someone asked me, how would you feel if someone treated you that way, my honest response would have been that people do treat me that way every day, and that how I feel about it is something I don't acknowledge. Was abused at home and had a poo home life. I just acted that way because it felt normal. I didn't know how else to relate to other people. One day, probably around 5th grade, the principal, who was very kind and involved in student life, took me aside and had a long talk with me. She explained how my actions were making the other kids feel. That my behavior made them feel scared and hurt their feelings. She asked me how would I feel if somebody said and did those same things to me. It was hard for me to understand what she was asking me. I didn't think that how I felt mattered. People did treat me like that every day, and I was not allowed to think about how it made me feel. She wasn't mean or judgmental. She was someone I liked and trusted, and she just patiently explained it to me until I at least kind of understood. I was shocked. I hadn't even realized that the other kids truly minded the way I was treating them. I know that sounds dumb, but I thought that it was normal to be mean and hurtful. That it was just how you were supposed to talk to people. If they cried and got upset, it didn't really mean anything. Because it didn't really mean anything when I cried and got upset at home. When I told my family that they were hurting me, they didn't stop, they punished me. I was expected to wake up the next day and truly act like nothing happened, or I was ungrateful and a terrible child. It was wrong to talk about or think about how their abuse made me feel. So that's just what I thought hurting people meant. That it didn't really matter, and that by next day they should just be over it, or it was their fault for being a dumb crybaby. Needless to say, I didn't have many friends, and I didn't understand why nobody wanted to be around me. But she explained to me that no, it's not normal for people to treat you that way, and it's not normal to treat others that way either. She put me in school counseling too. It wasn't great, but it at least helped me learn the basics of how humans are supposed to communicate. I still treated people badly sometimes all the way until college, but I think that the principal talking to me was the point when I actually realized that something was wrong with my behavior, and when I actively started working on it. I feel bad about the way I acted, but at the same time, it's all such a jumble of trauma, and it felt so normal to me that it's hard for me to even remember. It's hard to identify exactly what happened and what parts were or weren't my fault. I don't really think about the bullying part too much anymore, to be honest, because it's such a small part of a much bigger trauma. Anyways, I'm sure that people are bullies for many reasons, but this one explanation. I hope that it helps someone understand a little better.
You explained this beautifully. The part where you said, because it didn't really mean anything when I cried and got upset at home. This helped me understand in a big way.
It took a really long time for me to understand that my feelings mattered and to be able to identify them. I think that's a necessary prerequisite for empathy. I really used to think that any time someone complained or cried or anything, it was their fault for being weak, and that they should be mocked for it. Honestly, that's a brutally harsh reality to live in. The world was much brighter for me once I learned that feelings matter, and that it's okay to approach others and myself with empathy and compassion. It was such a foreign concept at first though. Honestly, I'm still working on not feeling bad for feeling bad. I still definitely struggle with my own mental health issues, but at least I can safely say that I'm really careful not to be harsh and mean to others now.
Interesting point you made about not giving a go to making others cry. As when you were made to cry, nobody gave a poo. In fact, you were punished. You've come a long way. Good poo.
Thanks. It's easy to forget how far we've come until we look back. Sometimes I still struggle with self-esteem, but it's true that I've come really far. I should probably remind myself of that more often. I hope someday I'll feel more confident in myself.
This was beautifully written and sounds like the culmination of a lot of self-reflection and hard work. Good on you.
Oh, thanks. It was years of therapy, medication, a whole shelf full of journals, moving far away from my family, and cutting off the worst of them. It's been a ton of work, and expensive too lol. But my worst fear is ending up like my family, so I've had plenty of motivation to become a healthier person.
I never bullied kids per se, but the part about dysfunctional family communication definitely followed me. I thought people just fought dirty and said the most hurtful possible things when they fought because that's how my parents talked to me. I thought it was normal for people to argue all the time. And I definitely thought that you didn't need to say sorry if you hurt someone's feelings, because my parents never did. It's amazing how much of relationship modeling happens at home in those early years. Took until I got myself an assload of therapy in college that I understood fully that no, people who like each other don't fight like that.
Yep, exactly this. To me it was just how you're supposed to handle conflict. To others it was incredibly mean and harsh. I literally thought that saying the meanest, cruelest thing you can think of is what you should do when you feel you have been wronged. Turns out most people get pretty hurt by that. Thank goodness for therapy, haha.
If someone asked me, how would you feel if someone treated you that way, my honest response would have been that people do treat me that way every day. When I first got together with my husband, I told him he was being verbally, mentally abusive. His response was, well then I've been abused my whole life. Yup. He proceeded to hang up on me. 5 minutes later he texted me a link to an article about verbal abuse and said, I'm an abuser. And so I married him. I've never met a more introspective and self-actualized person. It's hard to step outside yourself and see what you're up to. Good for you and thank you for helping others understand.
Haha, I relate to this on a deep level. My partner and I had kind of a similar problem. For the first part of our relationship, I was an emotionally abusive and manipulative jerk. I had improved my behavior in a lot of ways already, but she was my first serious relationship, and somehow that brought out all the worst in me again. It was super toxic, and the way I treated her is one of my biggest regrets in life. We broke up over it eventually. We spent a year apart and I spent a lot of time trying to sort through why being in a relationship suddenly brought all that pooty behavior back. When we got back together, it was a completely different relationship. Now we've been super happily together for 7 years. I had years of therapy, and we spent a lot of time improving our communication in that time. A ton of work went into this relationship, and we're both really proud of it. Not that I am encouraging anyone to get back with an abusive partner. Please do not do that, even if they've changed. We were so young back then, and if she had the standards and confidence that she has now, she wouldn't have given me a second chance. And she probably shouldn't have. Just because it worked out for us doesn't mean it's a good plan in most cases, lol.
This is fantastic. Thank you for sharing. We've been through a lot but it just keeps getting better and better. Winking face.
I guess what I mean to say is that I bet for a lot of people, the moment that you realize that you are abusing others may be the same moment you realize that you are being or have been abused. It's like, wait, if this is what abuse is, then WTF have I been living with this whole time? Has anyone explained this to my parents? Haha.
Sometimes it's hard to see what you went through and what you do is anything but normal until someone else calls you out on it. Or gently tells you that, that's not normal. I pointed out to my significant other that he has PTSD because of what he went through growing up. Seeing shootouts or dead bodies on your way to school isn't normal for an elementary school kid, or I would hope anyways.
I was a bully in like 3rd, 4th grades. And it was absolutely because my home life was poo, so I visited that poo on others. But then I knocked over a kindergartner, making his nose bleed really bad and he started crying. Nothing snaps you out of being an asshole faster than hearing a little kid sobbing for his mommy.
Not everyone stops when they see they've hurt someone else. Good for you for making that choice.
Some realize they enjoy it, unfortunately.
It's a small world. I got shoved by someone in 6th grade and he slammed my face into a locker. Screamed while in the most pain I had ever felt at the top of my lungs, oh yes daddy hit me harder, which got literally everyone laughing except him. Don't know if they were laughing at my joke, or laughing at the fact that I looked like Dumbledore broke his nose again and his nose was bleeding.
A kid tried picking a fight with me in the 6th grade. Being used to my older brother beating the poo out of me, I laughed at how weak his hits and shoves were, and it took the wind out of his sails pretty fast as the jeers of those watching started being directed away from me and at him. Then he just called me fat and walked away even though he was much fatter than I was. It was all pretty confusing since it came out of nowhere, and we had gotten along just fine the first half of the year as the two fat kids nobody wanted on their team in gym class. Making people laugh at the bully might just be the best strategy for dealing with them at that age.
I did that once when my dad was beating on me for something, can't remember what. I started laughing and said, "Come on, that didn't even hurt. Is that the best you can do? Be a man, hit like a man," and it weirded him out so much that he stopped.
Oh yes, daddy hit me harder, LMAO ha ha ha. The person who shoved you, what his reaction? Did he disturb you again?
He hit him harder.
Don't know what else I expected.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.